that's how my brain works it, because for years you hear raise your vibration. You're like, fuck your vibration. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like, ugh.
Yeah.
So that's how I look at it in my life, connecting the physical to the spiritual, is that when you're cleaning up, when you have healthier flow and all that, you're able to then have a healthy vibration and hold
Mm.
space better too, right? Especially when
Yes.
you're working on that mental and emotional side. I know for me, the triggers were my second son spit of me would trigger the shit out of me, right? And it was because I was feeling all the repressed emotions that I had still stuck inside of me. Um, but I was able to understand that and use modalities to release that. And so when you do that, you can hold more space, more compassion, more grace. You can become the observer and not react to the situations, because the situations are always going to happen. Your kid is always going to cry because he got the blue popsicle and he wanted the red, right? Like, that shit is never going to stop
Yes.
no matter how high your vibration is, right? Death is going to happen. Miscarriages are going to happen. Failed IVFs, like your uncle's wife is going to be a bitch still, like all that stuff is going to happen. But when you're clearing up your stuff, and okay, so higher vibrating beings are able to come to you. And in regards to why that's important, in my point of view, and not necessarily higher vibration beings or anything, but when you if you look at your own life and you see how hard it's been to deal with all the shit,
Mhm.
times that by 200 when you have a child who's healthy and happy. Times that by
Right.
1,000 when you have a child with mental and emotional issues, food allergies. I have a friend whose kid has a peanut allergy, and she says, "My life will never be the same. I will always worry that
Yeah.
especially when he gets older, right? Doesn't have his EpiPen with him, didn't realize there was
Hmm.
peanuts next to the drink he just, right? All those things make it so much harder
Hmm.
to get to that inner peace, to that vibe, because you are constantly having to deal with really difficult stuff.
Hmm. Yes.
So, my question is to you, which there's obviously souls that want to connect with that life, to learn that lesson, because it can be a beautiful
Mm-hmm.
lesson between families, right? I have
Mm-hmm.
a cousin with Down syndrome, with another one with cerebral palsy, and they have brought immense beauty and knowledge into our
Mm-hmm.
family's life, because we have to look at life in a different perspective. I
Mm-hmm.
think those things are part of nature. But I also think we've been fucking with nature so much that that kind of beauty is now getting distorted. If that does that make sense? Like, there's so much more physical, mental, emotional issues in our children than there ever has been in our past.
Mm. So is your question then like, how do we reconcile the fact that looking at children today and like, Gen Alpha and looking at like how much they're having to deal with is like how are we reconciling the fact that there are supposedly higher level beings that are then needing to like come into our little bodies that aren't vibrating as high? Is that the question?
Yeah, I mean, the question is that from my point of view, or how I choose to look at it, is that there's always going to be different kind of levels, but do high vibrating beings that have, like, 10 quadruple bazillion million years of knowledge go, yeah, I want to choose that experience again? I wanna choose to see how it feels, see what those emotions are like, vibe with that parent, vibe with the, um now, I mean, God, we have, like, the egg donor, the sperm donor, the embryo donor, the adoption,
Yep.
it's so much more. So in my
Mhm.
head, I'm like, "All right, what are you beings, like, doing? What are we learning now?" And
Yeah.
obviously there has to be a shift, because the reality is if you keep going with the majority of the population getting sicker and stupider, I'm just going to say it, you're not going to have a functioning population. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, it's going to tip to a
Mhm.
point where you have more people in care than carers.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and as one of those carers, I couldn't completely understand. Yeah. So I love the question. I love well, and I wouldn't even call it a question. I would say it's more of like just a thought experiment. So this, idea of, where do we want to end up? Because look at where we are now. And what truly is our goal, and how much are we going to allow in our world? And your thought really should get people triggered around, like how our food is grown and the people we have in our governments and who's making the laws and things like that. From the standpoint of the where your question was of like, what soul would choose to come into all of these kind of like crazy scenarios that can like come up, and how do they sort of like decide, or like you said, number one, there's always levels. So, when I say that there is a wave of beings that have lived multitudinous lives and have already healed and are not coming into this life now necessarily to have to learn a bunch of things, but more to do a bunch of things. It is just a wave. It's not all of them. It's not
Mhm,
everyone. Not every soul has lived a multitudinous amount of incarnations. Some souls were lazy and didn't want to learn. And so they didn't incarnate, because the only way you can learn is to incarnate and to live a life and to learn things and to make mistakes, no matter whether you're choosing to be a rock, a human, a bird, or a star being out there, or an alien. you know um you have to incarnate in order to actually learn and advance your soul. If you are going to stay up in the like liminal space, which there are quite a few fragments of souls that want to do that,
mhm,
they understand that living is hard regardless about where you live or what you're doing. And because they have chosen to not incarnate, it means that they are that soul that doesn't necessarily need the I'm a Zen master. I have like handled all my crap. I have done all the psyche. I have done all of the meditations. And they need that, you know, crack whore on the corner that hasn't healed to be their mom. Right? Like this. So when we are thinking about this is where it can kind of be a meta mind fuck, because
yeah.
you're like, well, wait a second. Like, if we're all becoming these advanced humans eating nothing but organic, and only, allowing, um, the amazing moderate individual to lead our governments, which obviously isn't happening. Um, it would be it would mean that this we wouldn't be even having this conversation,
Mhm,
right? Because the mass majority of us wouldn't be struggling, right?
yeah.
So it is just a wave. It's not, and so we can't put quantifiable numbers on this stuff, because it would be the same problem we would have about trying to quantify who in our current society, global society right now, do we want to consider woke individuals or sleeping individuals? Who are we going to quantify as the enlightened few versus the many sheep,
Mhm.
right? Who can put a number to that?
Yeah.
It would be the same thing to try to do that with the spirit babies and who is the more advanced soul versus the quote unquote lazy soul. And there's really no such thing as a lazy soul. There's just, they're making choices just the same way we are. Right. So um there are levels, there is a spectrum. There is absolutely a reason for why we have all of these different modalities of how we can get pregnant and how a baby can come to us, because there is a whole variety of souls out there that need all of those options.
Mhm.
And this is where I'm a firm believer in nothing happens by accident. What's meant to be will be. What is meant for you will not miss you. It will not pass you. And it won't pass you because you're going to do what's necessary to get there, and they're going to do what's necessary to get there.